The outcast Omega was left chained alone, until the Alpha King broke every shackle. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Sarah McAllister, an Omega, sat alone in the cold, dark cell at the edge of the pack's territory. Her hands were bound tightly to the stone wall, her heart heavy with the weight of rejection. The sound of the wind howling outside echoed through the empty chamber, but it was the silence within that gripped her heart the most. She had been abandoned, left to suffer in isolation, a fate that many in her pack had deemed inevitable. The other Omegas were strong, their wolves waiting to emerge as they reached adulthood, but not Sarah. Her wolf had never stirred, leaving her an empty vessel in a world that valued power above all else. No one had come to visit her. No one had offered her comfort. She had become nothing more than a ghost, a reminder of what happened when the moon's gift was absent. As she sat there, chained to the cold stone, her mind wandered back to the past. She remembered the day she had first realized she was different. It had been the night of the great mating ceremony, the night when every Omega of age was presented to the Alpha King, the night that every other Omega had been claimed. But not her. The Alpha King, Lucas Blackwood, had passed her by as though she were invisible. His piercing silver eyes had scanned over the others, and when they landed on her, they had moved on without a second glance. Sarah had hoped, prayed even, that this night would be different, that the Alpha King would see something in her that others had overlooked. But no, she was just a broken Omega, and no one had wanted her. She had been humiliated, cast aside like a discarded piece of cloth. The pain of rejection still burned in her chest, a constant reminder of her inadequacy. Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud bang against the door of the cell. She startled, pulling at the chains, but they held her tight, unyielding. A voice called out from the other side, deep and commanding. "Release her." The voice was unmistakable. It was the voice of Lucas Blackwood, the Alpha King. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, confusion and disbelief flooding her mind. Why was he here? What did he want with her? The door creaked open, and in walked the Alpha King, his presence filling the small room like a storm. His eyes, cold and hard, locked onto hers, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt seen. She couldn't breathe as he moved toward her, each step measured and powerful. She was trapped, bound by chains, yet she couldn't look away from him. He stood before her, towering over her, his gaze unwavering. Without a word, he knelt down, his powerful hands breaking the chains that held her captive. The metal fell to the floor with a loud clatter, and Sarah's body shook as she was finally freed. She couldn't believe it. The Alpha King had come to release her from her prison. His gaze softened for just a moment as he looked at her, his voice low and filled with something she couldn't quite place. "You're not what they said you were," he murmured, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. Sarah stared up at him, her heart racing. She was no longer the outcast, the rejected Omega. In that moment, everything changed. The Alpha King had chosen her, and for the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she truly belonged. As Sarah stood there, finally free from the chains that had bound her for so long, a mix of confusion and disbelief swirled within her. Lucas Blackwood, the Alpha King, remained kneeling before her, his silver eyes locked onto hers. His presence was overwhelming, like a storm that had suddenly swept into her quiet, lonely world. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, emotions that neither knew how to express. Sarah, still recovering from the shock of her freedom, tried to steady her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Why did you come for me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lucas did not answer. Immediately. Instead, he stood up, his towering frame casting a long shadow over her. He reached out, and for the first time, Sarah felt the warmth of his touch as his hand rested gently on her shoulder. She shivered at the contact, not from fear, but from the sudden surge of emotions that flooded her. The touch was comforting, but it also felt like a promise, something that both terrified and fascinated her. "Because," Lucas began, his voice low and filled with a rare vulnerability that surprised Sarah. "I can see you. The real you, not the one they wanted you to be." Sarah's mind raced. She had always been invisible to everyone, even to herself. She had spent so many years in the shadows, feeling worthless, unloved, and unimportant. To hear him speak of seeing her, truly seeing her, felt like a dream. "But I'm nothing," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "I'm just a broken Omega, a weak, unimportant Omega who was left behind." Lucas shook his head, his expression hardening with a fierce determination. "You are not nothing," he said, his voice firm. "And you are not weak. The world may have tried to break you, but I won't." Sarah looked up at him, her heart fluttering in her chest. She had never heard anyone speak to her like this before. Not with such certainty, not with such conviction. "But I don't have a wolf," she murmured, her gaze dropping to the ground. "I've never shifted, never felt the bond, never had the power that the others have. I'm useless." Lucas took a step closer to her, his face now just inches from hers. His eyes softened as he reached for her chin, gently tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "You are not defined by what you lack," he said softly. "Your worth isn't measured by a wolf's power. It's measured by your heart, your strength, your ability to survive in a world that has tried to crush you." The warmth of his hand on her chin sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, and she felt a tear slip down her cheek, something she hadn't allowed herself to do in years. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, truly seen, by someone who didn't care about her weaknesses or her flaws. She was more than the things she had been told she was. "But why me?" she asked, her voice barely more than a breath. "Why not one of the others? One of the Omegas who has a wolf, who is strong?" Lucas stepped back, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because," he began, his voice low and resolute, "I see your strength. The others may have power, but you have something they don't. You have the heart of a warrior, and that is something that cannot be broken." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had spent so long hiding, convinced that she was nothing, that she would never be worthy of anything. And yet here was the Alpha King, telling her that she was something more. She was important. She was worth something. For the first time, she felt the weight of her chains lift, not just the physical ones, but the emotional ones that had held her captive for so long. Lucas reached out again, this time taking her hand in his grip warm and firm. "Come with me," he said, his voice steady. "You belong with me, Sarah. And together, we will show this world that you are not to be underestimated." Sarah felt a rush of emotions flood through her, and for the first time, she felt a spark of hope. Could it be true? Could she really belong somewhere, with someone who saw her for who she truly was? She didn't know what the future held, but in this moment, standing before the Alpha King, she felt a sense of belonging that she had never known. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could finally start to believe in herself. As Lucas led her away from the cold cell, Sarah's heart soared. This was just the beginning of something new, something that would change everything. The shackles were broken, and the world was open to her once more. As Sarah followed Lucas through the halls of the Blackwood Citadel, the weight of everything that had happened in the past few hours began to settle on her. She could hardly believe that this was her life now. Freedom, but not just any freedom. Freedom with him, the Alpha King. She had been nothing just moments ago, a broken, discarded Omega. And now, she walked by the side of the most powerful man in the kingdom. The citadel itself seemed to pulse with a strange energy, its towering stone walls looming. Over her, the air was thick with history, with power, with something Sarah couldn't quite place. But as they walked deeper into the citadel, she felt a strange sense of unease creeping in. The halls were lined with banners and tapestries, each depicting powerful wolves in battle or at the head of grand feasts. Yet it was the eyes in those tapestries that unsettled her, the same cold silver eyes that Lucas possessed. Those eyes seemed to follow her wherever she went, reminding her of just how much power he held and how little she had. As they reached the grand chamber, Lucas turned to her, his expression unreadable. "This is where I reside," he said quietly, his voice carrying a quiet authority that sent a shiver down her spine. "But it is not just mine. It is ours now." Sarah paused in the doorway, her heart racing. "Ours?" she asked, her voice trembling. He nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "You are not just my maiden name, Sarah. You are my Luna. This kingdom, the pack, It all belongs to you as well." The words were both comforting and terrifying. How could she, a broken Omega, possibly fit into this world of power and grandeur? How could she possibly stand by his side as his equal? She had been nothing for so long. But Lucas reached out, placing a hand gently on her arm. His touch was warm, reassuring. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. "I chose you because you are strong, even if you don't see it yet. You are not what they told you you were." Sarah met his gaze, searching for the sincerity she needed to believe in his words. And for the first time in her life, she felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't just an Omega, she wasn't just a nobody. She was something more. "We will do this together," Lucas continued, his voice low and filled with a promise. "You and I, we will lead this pack, and we will shape this kingdom. I will not force you to become something you are not, but I will show you the strength you already possess." Sarah swallowed, her throat tight. "What if I can't do it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lucas smiled, a rare, soft smile that reached his eyes. "You already are," he said simply. "You just don't know it yet." As he led her further into the citadel, Sarah felt the weight of the responsibility settling on her shoulders. But for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. Maybe, just maybe, she could be the Luna he believed her to be. Maybe she could finally be someone worth believing in. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges she couldn't yet see, but as Lucas guided her through the grand halls, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was where she was meant to be. With him, and with the pack. Together, they would face whatever came next, and maybe, just maybe, she would find the strength to be the Luna he needed her to be. The next few days passed in a blur of unfamiliar routines and overwhelming emotions for Sarah. She had always been an outsider, but now she was stepping into a new world, one she didn't fully understand, but was beginning to feel a part of. Lucas was with her every step of the way, guiding her through the citadel, showing her the places she would soon call home. The grandeur of the Blackwood citadel was nothing like the humble home she had once known. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting ancient battles and heroic figures, and the hallways echoed with the voices of the pack members, who looked at her with a mix of curiosity and respect. But it was the looks from the other Omegas that unsettled her the most. They watched her with quiet intensity, some with envy, others with suspicion. She had once been one of them, but now, with Lucas by her side, she was something entirely different. Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of their stares. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not in such a powerful setting. As she walked through the Citadel's grand hall, she could feel the whispers trailing behind her, the questions that lingered in the air. "She's with the Alpha King now," one Omega murmured, her voice tinged with jealousy. "What makes her so special?" another one asked. Sarah's heart raced, the familiar feeling of being an outsider creeping back in. But then Lucas's voice cut through her thoughts. "Ignore them," he said softly, his hand brushing against hers. "You have nothing to prove to anyone but yourself." His words were simple, but they held a weight that made Sarah stop and look up at him. His silver eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. He didn't see her as an outsider, as broken or weak. He saw her as his equal, and that thought both terrified and comforted her. Over the next few days, Lucas continued to show Sarah the inner workings of the Citadel. He introduced her to the leaders of the pack, those who would be her allies, and those who would test her resolve. There were times when Sarah felt like a small fish in a vast ocean, but Lucas's presence was a steady anchor, always there to support her. One afternoon, as they walked through the gardens of the Citadel, Lucas stopped and turned to her. "You're ready," he said, his voice serious. "The pack needs you, not just as my mate, but as their Luna." Sarah hesitated, unsure of what he meant. "But I don't know what to do. I've never led anyone before." Lucas smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made his silver eyes soften. "You don't need to know everything right now. Just trust yourself, Sarah. The pack will follow you because they believe in you, just as I do." His words stirred something deep within her, a spark of courage she hadn't known she had. She had spent so long feeling like she wasn't enough, but Lucas was asking her to believe in herself. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she had the power to make a difference. That night, as Sarah lay in her new chambers, she thought about everything Lucas had said. She could feel the weight of her new role pressing down on her, but she also felt something else, a quiet strength beginning to grow within her. Maybe she wasn't just an Omega after all. Maybe she was more than what the world had told her she could be. The moonlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow over the room. Sarah closed her eyes, her thoughts drifting. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. She was no longer the broken, discarded Omega. She was Sarah McAllister, Luna of the Blackwood Pack, and she was ready to embrace her new life. The path ahead would not be easy, but with Lucas by her side, she was beginning to believe that she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would lead the pack into a new era, one built on strength, trust, and love. The days in the Blackwood Citadel moved slowly, each one feeling like a new chapter for Sarah. She had spent most of her life in the shadows, never quite belonging. But now, with each passing day, she found herself growing into the role she had never imagined for herself. Lucas, her mate, her alpha king, was always there by her side, offering quiet guidance when needed, and sometimes, just a comforting presence when words weren't enough. As the weeks went by, Sarah began to take on more responsibilities within the pack. She wasn't just a figurehead. Lucas trusted her, and so did the pack. It was not just his support, but the way the pack began to accept her that made all the difference. She could feel their eyes on her as she walked through the citadel, some filled with curiosity, others with admiration. They had begun to look at her differently, no longer as the weak Omega, but as their Luna, a leader in her own right. One afternoon, after another lengthy meeting with the council, Sarah found herself standing in the grand library of the citadel, her fingers lightly grazing the spines of the ancient books that lined the shelves. She had always loved books, the way they held knowledge and history in their pages. But now, they felt more like a barrier she couldn't quite break through. Do you ever feel like you're not enough? Sarah's voice broke the silence, and she turned to see Lucas standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable, though his eyes held a quiet concern. He stepped inside, his powerful presence filling the room, but his gaze was soft as he approached her. What do you mean? He asked gently, his tone laced with curiosity. Sarah closed her eyes, her hand still resting on a book. I see how they look at me, she said, her voice almost a whisper. I see how the pack looks at me like I'm something to be tolerated, like I'm not really one of them. I'm still just the Omega. I'm not like you, Lucas. I don't have the power, the strength you have. Lucas was silent for a moment, his gaze studying her with a mix of affection and understanding. He reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, the weight of his touch grounding her. You're not like me, he said softly, his voice steady. And that's exactly why you're perfect for this role. You don't need to be like me. You don't need to be the strongest wolf in the room. Your strength lies in something different, something more important. You've always had it, Sarah. The ability to lead with kindness, to see the best in others, even when they can't see it themselves. That is what makes you strong. Sarah looked up at him, her heart fluttering at his words. He was right. She had spent so much time trying to prove herself, trying to be something she wasn't. But maybe it was time to accept that she didn't need to change. She just needed to be herself. I've always felt like I didn't belong, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Like I wasn't enough for anyone or anything. But with you, with this pack, it feels different. For the first time, I feel like I'm meant to be here. Lucas smiled, his expression softening. You belong here, Sarah. You belong with me, with the pack. You are enough. More than enough. His words hung in the air, wrapping around Sarah like a warm embrace. She felt a sense of peace settle over her, the doubts that had plagued her for so long slowly fading away. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. Thank you for believing in me. Lucas gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. I've always believed in you, he said quietly. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were the one I was meant to be with. And I will always believe in you, Sarah. In that moment, Sarah realized that she had found something she had never thought possible. Acceptance, love, and a place where she truly belonged. It wasn't about power or strength. It was about trust, about being seen for who she truly was, and knowing that she was enough just as she was. Together, with Lucas by her side, she would face whatever came next. They would lead the pack, not through force, but through understanding and compassion. She was not just the Omega anymore. She was Sarah McAllister, Luna of the Blackwood Pack, and she was ready to embrace her future, whatever it may hold. As Sarah stood by the window of her new chambers, gazing out at the vast expanse of the Blackwood citadel, she couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. Just weeks ago, she had been a broken, discarded Omega, chained and left alone to live in the shadows of a world that had never understood her. Now, she was Luna of the Blackwood pack, standing alongside Lucas, the Alpha King, as an equal. She had come a long way in such a short time, and yet, there was still so much to learn. The weight of her new responsibilities pressed down on her shoulders, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face them. Her days were filled with meetings, discussions about the future of the pack, and learning how to navigate the complex dynamics of being a Luna. It was exhausting, but it was also empowering. With Lucas at her side, guiding her every step of the way, she was beginning to believe that she could make a difference. One morning, after a particularly long council session, Sarah found herself alone in the garden, seeking a moment of quiet away from the bustle of the citadel. The garden was her favorite place in the entire citadel. It was serene, peaceful, and a place where she could be herself, away from the expectations that came with her new role. As she wandered among the flowers, she reflected on the days that had led her here. She had been afraid, unsure of her worth, convinced that she would never truly belong. But Lucas had believed in her, and now, the pack was beginning to see her for who she really was. The weight of her self-doubt had started to lift, replaced by a quiet confidence that had taken root deep within her. As she bent down to smell a rose, she felt a familiar presence beside her. She looked up to find Lucas standing there, watching her with that same steady gaze that had first drawn her in. "I was wondering where you'd gone," he said, his voice warm and comforting. "I needed a moment," Sarah replied, her gaze meeting his. "Sometimes it all feels like too much, you know? There's so much I still don't understand, so much I still need to learn." Lucas smiled, stepping closer to her. "You're doing just fine," he said, softly. "Better than fine, actually. The pack sees it too. They see your strength, Sarah. They see what I see." Sarah's heart skipped a beat at his words. For so long, she had doubted herself, convinced that she wasn't enough. But now, with Lucas by her side, she was beginning to see herself differently. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Lucas reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her. "You'll never have to find out," he said, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "I'm here always. And together, we'll face whatever comes next." Sarah looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude and love. This was the man who had not only saved her, but had helped her find the strength within herself to rise above the shadows of her past. She wasn't just the Omega anymore. She was Sarah McAllister, Luna of the Blackwood pack, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With Lucas by her side, she knew that they could accomplish anything. And as they stood together in the garden, hand in hand, Sarah felt a quiet peace settle over her. She had found her place, her purpose, and her future. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in her life, she was no longer afraid. She was ready. As Sarah and Lucas continued their journey together, the days in the Blackwood Citadel became both easier and more complicated. With each passing day, Sarah learned more about the intricacies of leadership, about the responsibilities she would carry as Luna. The members of the pack, once distant and unsure of her, now began to look to her for guidance. She was still unsure of herself at times, but Lucas was always there, offering reassurance and support. There were moments, however, when doubt would creep in. Sarah would find herself in the council meetings, surrounded by pack members who had been loyal to Lucas long before she had arrived, and she would wonder if they truly accepted her or if they only tolerated her because of her connection to their Alpha King. Lucas, of course, could see the conflict in her eyes, and one evening, as they walked through the Citadel's grand hall after a long meeting, he stopped and turned to face her. "Sarah," he said softly, "I see the doubt in your eyes. You don't need to prove yourself to them. You are already there, Luna. You just have to believe in yourself." Sarah looked up at him, feeling the weight of his words. She had never been one to believe in herself. Her life had been defined by rejection, by the belief that she would never be enough. But with Lucas by her side, she was beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, she was. "But how can I?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I'm still not like them. I don't have the power that you do, that they do." Lucas stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her face. Power isn't always about strength, Sarah. It's about heart, about understanding others, and about leading with compassion. You have all of that, more than anyone I've ever known. His words, soft yet firm, settled in her heart like a warm ember. She wanted to believe him, but there was still that lingering fear, that voice inside her telling her she wasn't enough. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted quietly. Lucas smiled, his silver eyes glinting with a rare warmth. You've been ready all along. And when you're unsure, just remember this. You're not alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. The reassurance in his voice gave her the strength she needed, and for the first time, Sarah realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to be perfect to be a leader. Over the next few weeks, Sarah began to settle into her new role. She took part in more council meetings, began advising on matters concerning the pack's welfare, and made sure to visit the families in the Citadel, offering her support to those who needed it. The more she stepped into her role, the more confident she became. There were still moments of doubt, but they were fewer and farther between. One evening, after a particularly long day, Sarah found herself in the garden again, her favorite place in the Citadel. She sat on the stone bench, her eyes closed as the moonlight bathed her in its soft glow. Lucas found her there, as he often did, and sat beside her, his presence a quiet comfort. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice gentle. Sarah opened her eyes and turned to him, offering him a small smile. "Stronger," she said simply. "I think I'm starting to believe I can do this." Lucas took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. "I never doubted you for a moment," he replied. As they sat together, Sarah realized that this was where she was meant to be, not just by Lucas's side, but as the Luna of the Blackwood pack. She wasn't perfect, and she didn't need to be. She just needed to be true to herself, and with Lucas by her side, she knew that together, they could face whatever came next. As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself settling more into her role as Luna of the Blackwood pack. The weight of leadership was still a challenge at times, but Lucas was always there to guide her, providing both counsel and comfort when needed. With each passing day, Sarah grew more confident in herself and in her abilities. She had learned that leadership wasn't about being perfect, but about listening to the pack, making decisions with compassion, and leading by example. The Citadel had become her home, and she could feel the pack's respect for her growing, though there were still moments of doubt that crept in. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the Citadel, Sarah and Lucas stood together on the balcony of the main tower. The view was breathtaking, with the vast forest stretching out beneath them, the trees swaying gently in the evening breeze. It was moments like this that made her realize how far she had come. She had once felt small and insignificant, a discarded omega, and now, here she was, standing at the side of the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. "You've come a long way," Lucas said, his voice low and filled with pride. Sarah turned to him, meeting his gaze. His silver eyes were filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place, but it was clear that he saw her, truly saw her. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. Lucas smiled, his expression tender. "You've always had the strength within you, Sarah. I just helped you realize it." His words sent a wave of warmth through her. She had always felt like she was nothing, but now, with Lucas's belief in her, she was starting to see herself differently. She was more than just an omega. She was strong, capable, and worthy of her place by his side. As the night drew closer, the stars began to twinkle in the sky above them, a reminder of how far she had come from the lonely girl she once was. "What comes next?" Sarah asked, her voice thoughtful. "Whatever we decide," Lucas replied, his tone full of promise. "Together, we will shape the future of this pack, of this kingdom." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with hope for the future. She wasn't alone anymore. She had found her place, not just as Lucas's Luna, but as a leader in her own right. Together, they would face whatever challenges the future held, and together, they would build a future where their pack could thrive. For the first time, Sarah truly believed in that future. It wasn't just a dream, it was their reality. And with Lucas by her side, she knew they could accomplish anything. As Sarah walked through the Blackwood Citadel, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. The woman who had once been chained and forgotten was now walking alongside Lucas, the Alpha King, with her head held high. The pack had come to accept her, not just as his mate, but as their Luna. It had taken time, but Sarah had earned their respect, not through force, but through understanding, compassion, and the strength she had long hidden within herself. Each day felt like a new challenge, but it was one she was ready to face. Her relationship with Lucas had grown deeper, not just a partnership of power, but one of trust and shared purpose. They worked together to ensure the pack thrived, making decisions side by side, and it was becoming clear that their bond was more than just a political alliance. There was something real between them, something powerful. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of their chambers, overlooking the vast, moonlit forest that stretched out from the citadel, Sarah turned to Lucas. The soft glow of the moon reflected in his silver eyes, and for a moment, the weight of their responsibilities seemed far away. "Do you ever wonder what comes next?" Sarah asked, her voice soft but full of meaning. Lucas glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "Every day," he said, "but I believe we're building something important here. Together, we're creating a future for this pack, one where strength isn't just about power, but about unity and understanding. And that future, Sarah, starts with us." His words settled in her heart, filling her with a sense of purpose. She was no longer just an outsider, no longer just the Omega who had been cast aside. She had a place here, not just at Lucas's side, but as an equal partner in their shared mission. "I never imagined I would be here," Sarah admitted, her voice full of quiet wonder. "I never imagined that I would be the one to lead, to have a family, a home, a future." Lucas reached out, his hand gently resting on hers, grounding her in the moment. "You've always had the strength to lead, Sarah. It was never about what you didn't have, but about who you are. You've always had the heart to make this work." Sarah looked at him, her heart swelling with affection. She had never believed in herself the way Lucas believed in her. But with each passing day, she was learning to see herself as he did. The woman who had been left behind was now the Luna of the Blackwood pack, and she had a future ahead of her that she never thought possible. As the night grew darker, and the stars twinkled brightly in the sky, Sarah leaned into Lucas, feeling the warmth of his presence, the safety of his love. She was no longer just an Omega, no longer defined by what she lacked. She was Sarah McAllister, and she was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. With Lucas by her side, there was nothing they couldn't face. Together, they would lead the Blackwood pack into a new era, a future filled with hope, strength, and the kind of love that could change everything.